Yeah. Yep. I love that. I love that trust. I love that a producer says, look, I'm not going to solve the problem for you. Here's what I feel like isn't working. And then let the creative team solve it.
This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett Batty and I, Darren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions.
Okay, welcome to our episode. Darren, nice to see you. How you feeling?
Oh man, I'm feeling great. I'm excited to be here. I'm loving that we're kind of tackling different aspects of the filmmaking process that we've experienced over our careers, and like we're giving little mini master classes about this stuff. It's fun.
Well, my goal is to share my experience, and I don't consider myself at all a master at anything. But if I can share my experience and people can learn from that and learn what not to do or something that would help them in their process as far as making an independent film, that's the value of that I'm able to offer.
Oh, there we go. We'll let
Well,
the audience decide.
I can't wait to talk. I do love that this season is really mirroring our experience as far as where we are in development of our next project. So here we are, episode 4, and we're going to be talking about notes today, like writing notes, receiving notes, how to obtain notes on this creative process.
Yeah, I'm very excited. This has been something where, I started in film doing post-production sound. And so I never had any kind of access to or experience with notes. But the very first thing I did outside of sound was write a screenplay with my old business partner and friend. And notes was a big part of like, how do we get this thing made? Oh, we should talk to people. We should get feedback. We should do table reads. We should get notes. Okay, cool, let's do it. And so we're going on 15 years that I've been giving and receiving notes, and I'm excited to chat about it as well.
My first gig was editing, and an editor is going to, I mean, that is the role of an editor is to, make an offer and receive notes and take
Mhm.
notes. And then here I am, I've written 10 to 12 screenplays and have received notes and given notes. And so, yes, I have a lot of experience to share. And again, hopefully it helps us demystify the independent film process.
Amazing.
Um, and then, Darren, we also want to talk about a movie that we just watched yesterday in the theater. So we'll
Yes, we
talk
do.
about
We'll get to
that.
that as well.
Okay. Last week, I visited with a friend of mine. We went to a little deli down in Provo and shared script pages. And I took 20 minutes to read what he had written. He went over what I had written, and we just kind of talked and shared notes. And it was such a refreshing process. It's something that's so simple, and I haven't done for a long time. And I love that we have this now. I mean, this very mini writers group that we can share writing notes as we're writing these scripts and developing these projects. It's such an important part of independent film.
Yeah, that's so smart. And it's one of the things I would recommend to anyone listening, whether they're a writer or a director or a producer or a filmmaker, is like join groups of peers that are on the same journey as you, right? And so if you are a writer, joining a writers group gives you this kind of give and take where I love how you phrased it. You made an offering. You brought something to the table. And in a writers group, there's this inherent like, I'm going to give feedback on all of your guys' stuff. And you're in exchange, I'm going to get feedback from you. I was just in a writer's cohort for like online writing, like social writing and writing essays and articles and stuff like that. But there were like 300 people in the group. And so you'd put up your draft and then you'd get feedback from some of the paid like writers and editors that are inside the company, which was amazing. But then you could just share it in the group and anyone could go check out your piece if it resonated from just like the title and the synopsis of it. And they'd go over to the Google Doc and they'd leave comments. I have one that had like 30 different people give me comments on, oh, this really resonated. Oh, this was confusing. Oh, I didn't get this part. And it was such an important part of the process. And I'm really proud of the 3 pieces that I wrote in that cohort. And so giving and receiving notes, super important. But when you've got that kind of give and take, where you're not just asking for notes, you're actually giving something in return, I think that's an important principle here too.
Darren, you bring up a good point. There does have to be a give and take. As a film producer, you receive scripts or ideas or pitches frequently, I would imagine there's a significant time investment to give notes, and that would probably slow down whatever else you're working on. How do you handle that? When
Yeah.
somebody
What
says,
I've
"Hey, can you read my script?"
Can you read my script? I'll a word of caution to people that are listening to this: like, don't have your very first message to somebody, especially a producer, be, "Will you read my script?" It's just such a bigger ask than maybe you understand. So what I've been doing as a producer is been telling writers, like, send me a treatment, send me a synopsis, send me something that's just written in like a narrative format. It's not a screenplay. Send me something that tells the story in 5 to 15 pages, because I can read that in 20 minutes and I can be like, whoa, you've got something here. I see what the hook is. I see who the characters are. I see where the obstacles are and their intentions. And I know that this could be very cinematic. I can get all of that from a 10 or 15 page document. It doesn't really matter for me as a producer at this point if you know how to do proper formatting on a screenplay. What I want to see is, can you tell a story? And if I could do that in 15 or 20 minutes versus 2 hours, which is 2 hours to read the script and then another hour or two to consider it and give notes and send an email, you're talking half a day that you're asking someone to read a full screenplay and give notes, which I'm happy to do for people that I have a working relationship with or I have a long-standing friendship with, but not people that are messaging me on DM or in DMs on social media for the first time. So chunking it down and saying, hey, can I send you, let me do it this way too, because it also matters that it aligns with what I'm doing, right? So if someone's going to send me an R-rated slasher horror movie, I don't produce those. So maybe don't. But if you've got the next, Garrett Batty-esque movie and it's family friendly and there's a faith element and it's inspiring and it's something you could watch with the whole family, you could say, hey, I've got something that I think perfectly aligns with what you're doing with Producer Fund. I'd love to see if you'd be willing to take a look. I'm happy to send over a short synopsis. Psh, send it over, because now you've
Hmm.
done the homework to tell me that this is something I would actually value and want to check out. So there's some thoughts from the producer side.
No, I think that that's wonderful. I think the only thing that I would add to that as a producer is because I get that as well weekly. People will send scripts or ideas, and I usually try to respond with, again, it's got to be aligned with what I'm interested in doing, but I I request, and I'm it's always more helpful, I think, when there is a specific question or an understanding is, yes, what are you looking for? Will you read my script? Great. Yeah, it's a fun script, right? What are you looking for? Are you looking for notes? Are you looking for a commitment to produce this movie? Are you looking to hire me as a director? What are you looking for before I really invest a lot of personal like mind space into what their project is? And I'll also be very upfront and say, at this point, I am not looking for projects that don't have funding attached, or I'm not looking for projects that don't have that already have a director attached, right? And I think that that helps weed out a lot of things. It certainly probably doesn't get what they want, which is notes. But uh, from a producer's standpoint, if we gave notes to every single script that came across our desk, we'd never produce anything.
Yeah. I have two thoughts, but I'll start with one. One is that, there's this kind of inherent ask when you're reaching out to a producer where you are saying, will you take a look at this? And by doing so, will you also consider helping me get the next step?
Yeah,
So,
I'd want to clarify that if that ask wasn't involved, say, are you looking for a producer?
yeah. And so a lot of times I catch myself defaulting to like responding to that ask, which is like, I'm not looking for projects right now. And that's not really what they asked. They said, will you look at my script? And I responded with, I'm not looking for projects. Maybe
Uh,
I'm going too far and saying, I'm assuming that they want my help. But that kind of just tends to be the follow up question 90, 100% of the time. Like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
will you do it? But here's what's interesting is like, we just had Luke Johnson on the week before or 2 weeks before we had him on our show. I was in his office pitching him. And at the end of that meeting, he said, hey, can I send you some scripts? Because they're not for the company I work for, but they might be a good fit for your fund. And he sent me a script. He didn't do what you just said of like asking for specific notes. He just said, will you take a look at this? Meaning, will you consider this for your fund as a producer? And I said, yeah, I'll take a look. and it's a really good script that I actually really like and am considering. And so just realizing what you said is so important. Like, what are you actually asking for? Do you just want notes? Are you at that stage? Are you looking for, this is done, I'm ready to start fundraising or turning it into a movie? Those are all such important pieces of the context that play into this give and take, this offering and this response.
I think there's value too in, if those projects that come across looking for notes, to understand what the, not only the style and genre or whatever, but again the budget, and say, look, is there a team behind this? Is there funding already attached? I'll get sent scripts that there's no way that they could be done for under a certain amount of money, or the money that I have the ability to raise. And it would be, I think, again, if there's not a clear understanding of what the individual is looking for, do they want my notes or my perspective from a producer and say, yes, yeah, this is a $20 million movie and it would require this and this and this, and you'd have to shoot in various locations and so forth? Or are they looking for just story notes, and like,
Yeah.
they don't care? They don't care about budget and stuff like that. And those are two different reads when I read those.
I often ask for context of like, are you looking to produce this at a certain budget, or is this something that you're going to submit to Blacklist or to studios? Like, are you a rep writer? Do you have an agent who could send it around town? Like all those things very much play into the kind of notes I'm going to be giving. And one other quick thought is like, uh, it feels sometimes like I've done this in the past too, where like, man, if I could just have so and so attached as a producer, then my life will change dramatically, right? Like the project will get funded, it'll make $1 billion, and I'll have a career forever. And it's
Yeah.
like giving someone that doesn't even know you yet that much power over your future in this industry is pretty risky in my opinion. And so I would just urge listeners to do what we've said over the past, I don't know, 30 episodes or whatever we're at, of like, take the responsibility for yourself. Like if you're passionate about this project and someone says no, don't let that deter you. Keep going, find someone else, do it yourself, become a producer, like find the financing, put the team together. Like I'm not special in that I have some superhuman ability or gift from the gods to like produce movies. Anyone can just choose to be a producer and then start producing one day.
Okay, so Darren, we've talked a little bit about how to obtain notes, right? I mean,
Yeah, how to
hey,
ask.
I guess how to ask for notes, and maybe the note is, or the takeaway is, when you're approaching a person, is there a specific note in mind that you're looking for? Can you limit the ask, be respectful of that individual's time? As an independent filmmaker, saying, look, do you feel like there's a hook in the first 11 pages of this script, or do you feel like this movie could be done for a certain amount of money, or and so forth? Have a specific ask, and that would help facilitate, like help balance the give and take of that exchange. What where Once you give notes, I want to talk about two different things. I want to talk about receiving notes then, as a screenwriter or as a producer. You've sent it around and people have, there are tons of different opinions that have come back. You've got conflicting notes. Hey, change the main character to a female. Hey, set this in a different period, and they're all different notes or just a different movie. And then there's some valuable notes. Where, as a producer, how do you balance those, and who do you listen to?
Yeah, well, I think you first have to do what we just said in the first part of this episode, which is like, did you give the right kind of context? What kind of notes are you looking for? And so one of the things that I spent literally years kind of giving myself a master's degree in screenwriting and storytelling, the amount of books and courses and coaching and stuff that I did from like 2016 to 2020 is a lot. Like it's the equivalent of doing a master's degree in writing. Like I did a lot of research and study and education on this because I knew I wanted to be a producer. And I knew that one of the things that you have to be really good at as a producer is story. Like
Mm,
if you just film a bunch of flashy action stuff and there's no meat on the bones, then you've got a popcorn movie that doesn't satisfy an audience, and that wasn't interesting to me ever. And so I really resonate with stories that are well told, Some of my favorite screenwriters are like Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and their trilogy of movies. Christopher Nolan and Jonah Nolan, his brother, that write movies together. Just the layers and layers of story and payoffs and character development, and the way that they could make you cry in one scene and laugh in the next. Like, those are all the things that drew me to being a producer, because I wanted to recreate that for others with other stories. And so I think as a producer going into, I'm going to be developing stories, I'm going to give notes on things. I think you have to have done the work to be able to confidently say, this is what's missing for me here. And you have language to explain, not just this scene isn't working, but here's why. And you've got language around it, and you've got clarity, and you've got understanding, and you've got expertise, because you're saying, I know what I'm talking about. You can accept or reject my notes based on what you feel, but here's what I see is going on. And it's less about, I'll say it this way, I want to check a box of, is there emotional content here? I want to feel something. Did I feel something from reading a script? Then that's a good sign. But then most of my notes are, this is where it is working, and this is where it's not working, and this is how to maybe solve the parts that aren't yet working.
I think there's a lot of good insight there. And it made me think of experiences where, as a screenwriter, I'm receiving notes, conflicting notes from different producers or whatever it is, or as an editor, again, receiving different notes. I think that it's always important for me to remember that there's a reason for the note. Like, whether it's a note that I agree with or not, that that something I have written or created or directed instigated, like, started, gave somebody enough pause that they are going to give a note there. Now, whatever that note is, that has to be their opinion, and may or may not be the direction or the story that I'm trying to tell. But I have to pay attention to the fact that that caused them to stop from experiencing this story and to make an objection. And
That's big.
so it's not surrendering your creative control to listen to a note. I think it's, in fact, more enabling it. It's not a backseat driver. It's saying, okay, thank you for helping me avoid that pothole, but I'm still steering the car. I've been in situations where, I've sat with a screenwriter, I'm the director or screenwriter, and we're in a classroom setting. It was a writer's group, and they had all read the script, and they were giving feedback. And the screenwriter became very, very defensive. And so here we are. We showed up. They had all read the script. We showed up to accept notes, to listen to this writers group. They're students, so they're not expert writers or anything like that. But you have to go into the. I try to go into the mindset. Look, we've either happened to have written the best screenplay in the history of the world, or there's an opportunity to improve it.
Yeah.
And most likely, there's an opportunity to improve it. And so my screenwriter and myself were sitting in a classroom setting, and I'm asking for notes. Our goal is to tell the best story. And as students started to give notes, the screenwriter became very defensive. And first it was, the screenwriter said, I think on, or the comment maybe, I think on page 27, you should try this, or this caught my attention. And the screenwriter goes, oh, well, let me tell you why that's happening. And I thought, whoa, like, time out. This is not a conducive environment to, like, receiving notes. And it's that experience has stayed with me, because the class became very combative, and one, we didn't get any positive feedback. Like, it just became, oh, well, if you're not here to accept notes, then what are we even doing here? And so that experience stayed with me. Like, we have to be willing to receive and accept notes. Later, when you're at your desk, you can decide whether to put it in there or not, or whether to make the changes. But boy, in the moment, take the note.
Yeah. It makes me think of an experience I had as a producer about probably 7 or 8 years ago. I was in LA for some meetings, and a friend of mine who's a screenwriter and director down there invited me to a friend's screening of their movie that they had just produced and starred in and written. And so we go to the producer's house, and it's this, like, $6 or $7 million house in Culver City, like super nice. There's 20, 25 people there, and we're all there to like watch the movie. And I'd never been to a screening like this in LA. And so I'm there thinking, oh, this is a test screening. This is like getting feedback, getting notes, right? So I'm kind of watching it with the critical eye and going, oh, that worked. And oh, that didn't really work. And oh, the payoff didn't really land. And so at the end, the gal who I happen to be sitting next to, like the writer star of the movie, gets up in front of everybody and says, thank you. I'd love to know if you have any thoughts or any feedback, I'd love to hear it. And she was, I thought, being sincere. 0 people raised their hands. I probably should have paid attention that like, maybe this isn't what you do here. But I go, ooh, I got thoughts. And then I go on like a 5-minute spiel of your payoff doesn't land. And that's your whole movie. And I said, I think you already have the parts. I think if you took this and instead of saying that, you could overdub it and say this instead. Like I was processing this the whole time. I go, you do a setup here in the first act, and then you do a secondary callback in the middle act. And then at the end, you get to do this thing where there's this payoff that I think you're after, which doesn't quite land yet. And everybody, like even my buddy was like, dude, stop, like stop talking. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry if that, if you're not in a place to be able to make changes or anything, but like, I liked the movie. It didn't land. So I thought you'd want to know. And she goes, okay. And then we all break and we all go they're drinking wine and I'm drinking ginger ale or whatever it is. And we're chatting afterwards. She comes up to me and grabs my arm. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you were here. No one else is willing to give me notes on this thing.
Okay.
So if you as a producer can sit there and kind of analyze like, ooh, I know what you're trying to do. What if you did this and this and this? Then I think it would work. And then it's a collaborative thing. Like I didn't get to go and sit in the edit bay with them to make those changes, but like I kind of gave them what I thought pieces they already had and they could tweak and do to get the outcome. And they didn't do it. So that's fine too. They didn't end up making any changes. I saw the movie on streaming like years later and I was like, oh, I wonder if they made the change. Skip to the end and they didn't. But doesn't mean I was right and they were wrong. Just it's like interesting experience. But yeah.
It is interesting because those situations are so tough and delicate, and you have to know at what stage the project is in before in order to give notes. I did an audience screening. It was not a test screening. This was we're getting ready to release the movie, and the audience is screening, and this was for one of my first theatrical films, and it's a packed theater. And at the end, you hand out the survey, and it was more like, "Hey, how do we market this movie?" And 99% was positive, and here's oh, try this or this. And then there's one guy that wrote like a page and a half of like edits that needed, here's what you needed to do for this character and so forth, and it was just too little, too late. Then like, how do you giving notes on a screenplay? And one of the points that's made is about being positive. Like start with what you like and start with what works well.
Yeah.
And I think there's value in that. You do want to build, if somebody's, we're in this classroom setting, maybe the classroom could have taken more time to build the screenwriter up. Hey, we loved this, and holy cow, what a great, rom-com or whatever it was. And then here's specific notes. One thing I shy away from, and it sounds like your process is a little bit different. I try not to tell them how to fix it. I say, look, here's something that created confusion for me. And as a receiver of notes, I try to, again, I like to make sure that I'm still in control. Like I'm not looking for, as a screenwriter, I'm not looking for you to write this scene for me. Say, is this scene working? Why or why not? But as a screenwriter, I like to reserve the right to fix it.
Yeah. It's probably more my nature than like my mindset around it. Like, I don't know that I chose that is the right approach other than that's my default. I just tend to solve problems. That's my nature. But in that context, like what are we after here? And I think the meaning you give to notes can impact their efficacy a lot, right? If you're saying these notes mean that I'm a bad writer, well, you're not going to be very open to receiving notes in the future because it's a painful experience. But if you look at notes as this is an opportunity to make the script and the story better, and it's this separate thing from you. Yes, it's your baby. Yes, it's your artistic output. But if you can separate yourself and your ego from the work, then all of a sudden you can invite collaborators to come and look at this piece of work independent of you as the writer, the creator, and saying, ooh, what if we did this? Ooh, what if it looked like that? Ooh, come look at it from this angle. You might see what I'm seeing. And then it becomes this separate thing that doesn't have any impact on you as an individual or as a writer or as an artist. And in my experience, those note sessions go way better than the ones where it's you can tell that they're clinging to every word. And if you give any sort of negative or constructive feedback, it's like, oh, you think I'm a bad writer, so I'm never going to talk to you again. Because I've had
Yeah.
that happen as well. One other thought, though, is like we're after a screenplay that works. We're after a piece of writing that works. And whatever that means for you, that should be kind of shared with everybody else. What does it mean for this screenplay to work? Does it mean it wins a screenplay competition? Does it mean it can attach an actor? Does it mean it can raise funding? Does it mean it can get distribution? And those are 4 different outcomes, right? You ultimately want all of them, but which one's first and which one are you going after now? And if you have a screenplay that doesn't work, well, that's the reason to get notes, to be like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do here. Give me notes that will help me get there so that it's a screenplay that works.
Yeah. Yes, and I love that. And I think the way, let's see, I think clear and concise and specific notes are very helpful. And remembering that it is the writer's script. It's not the producer's yet. And the producer's job is to steer and guide the writer, not to imagine like how much better the screenplay would be if the producer had written it.
Yes.
Which is a great mindset to be in, both as a writer and a producer, and be like, oh, let us help elevate the writer and help them succeed.
Yeah, I had a friend who gave me that experience, not gave me, but shared an experience with me about how they brought on an executive producer who helped raise some of the money for the movie. And then that executive producer started writing script pages and scenes for themselves to be in the movie. And it's like, ooh, that's A, overstepping unless it was part of the contract, which I don't think it was. And B, it's not going to jive, right? Like you've got a writer and then you've got an executive producer. There's 2 different people who are working separately, not in tandem, and it hurt the movie. So yeah, as producers, I think we always need to respect the creative space of the artists that are doing the work, and we're protecting that space and we're helping them do their best work. And whether it means giving very specific constructive, like, what if you did this, this, and this? Maybe they're really stuck, or maybe they just don't see it. And so you have to kind of spell it out. But that doesn't mean I'm going to dive in and open, final draft or fade in and say, here's what I would say. I'm not going to start typing words into the screenplay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, thankfully so. And Darren, that's been one of the greatest collaborative experiences that I've been on in the past 2 projects with you as a producing partner, saying very where you give your notes, you express your opinion, and then you enable me to address it or fix it or keep it. I love that, and I think you give very, very insightful, specific, clear notes that are always for the benefit of the project. It's never an ego thing or anything like that. It's like, again, we're either making the best movie ever, or we can make it a little bit better. Like our goal is to make it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, one of the worst collaborative experiences I've ever had creatively is an EP that wanted to sit in the writer's room and write with me, and I became essentially a button pusher, um, transcribing what this EP was saying. This wasn't even my script. I was hired to direct this project, and it became just this nightmare of a project where it wasn't even notes. It wasn't fair to anybody, and it was just the EP sort of dictating their vision. And we were, it did not result in an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, notes should never be a way for you to satisfy the needs of your ego. If you don't feel like you're contributing, if you don't feel important, if you don't feel like you're having an impact on a project, the way to do that is not by taking over someone else's job or giving notes that have to be followed or else, because that's just satisfying your ego as a producer. And there's, in my mind, no space for that on a film set. You have to be so in control of yourself that you are not letting these parts of you, these egoic parts of you, show up and dominate a set. Like, that is the worst thing you can do as a producer or an EP. But there's this element of trust that's inherent in there too, right? Like, you can take a note from me because you know that I trust you with the final decision. And I'm not giving you a note with any sort of attachment or expectation or manipulation with it. It's literally just, what about this? Ooh, have you thought about this? Or what if they said this instead? And it's just like play. It's like, let's jam for 2 seconds in between takes. And then you're like, ooh, let's try it. Or I don't think it works. And I go, great. And I go sit in my chair and I keep watching movies being made. And it's amazing because there's no ego there.
Yeah.
And I implicitly trust you. So ego and trust, I think those are a big part, whether you're on set giving notes or whether you're giving notes, very, very early on, pre-money, pre-fundraising, pre-anything. And you're saying, this, I'm not giving you these notes to satisfy myself. I'm trying to help.
Yeah. Yep. I love that. I love that trust. I love that a producer says, look, I'm not going to solve the problem for you. Here's what I feel like isn't working. And then let the creative team solve it. And then vice versa. Trust yourself as a writer to be like, oh, I got us this far. Here's what's not working. It's obviously not working. They're seeing whatever I've written, they're not seeing it the way I'm seeing it because we're making the same movie, but it's not working for them. So how do I write it in such a way? Does that mean change dialogue? Does that mean change mise en scène? Does that mean change the whole plot point? But what is triggering the note? Darren, I want to talk a little bit about read-throughs because read-throughs are another great way
Yeah.
to receive notes. And I think there's this very vulnerable spot as a screenwriter to like say, okay, I'm going to put a draft out there and bring in actor friends to read what we all know will inevitably not be the final movie. But you got to do it, right? I mean, it's a great way to receive a lot of input in an evening of time. What's your been? Have you had an experience for read throughs, or what's your take on those?
Yeah, I've produced read throughs. Like, we did one on a screenplay that my buddy Alan and I wrote. This is probably back in 2015 or 2016, where we hired a bunch of people to come, a bunch of actor friends to read a bunch of parts. And we were there, we recorded it, we filmed it. And then we spent, the hour and a half to read through it. But then we had another hour set aside for notes because we wanted the actors' take. Tell me about your character. And a lot of the notes were, it just feels underdeveloped. It just feels like I'm standing in a corner not doing anything. You're like, oh, you're
Mm.
right. And that's a blind spot for early or younger writers who maybe haven't acted before to go, oh, I've got 6 people in this scene, but 2 people are talking and one of those other 6 people said one word and they don't have a purpose to be there. And that makes a big difference, not just on the story and the characters, but imagine fast forward to production. You got 4 people that were hired for the day to stand around in a room and they don't have anything to do. They don't feel good. You don't feel good. Your budget doesn't feel good.
Your
Like,
budget hurts, yeah.
yeah. So catching those things early on, and then being able to say, oh, let's not just bring in a producer, a writer, director's perspective. Let's bring actors' perspectives who are playing and embodying these characters. They're going to know, oh, this feels really good. I want to perform this part because it's so meaty. Or, I don't even see why you need this role. We didn't do anything.
Yeah. As a screenwriter, I usually do a big read through. This is before you've cast, before anybody's, before you've raised money, whatever. You might have a little bit of development funds. Or even as a writer for hire, I'll do get my draft. Usually it's my second draft because that first draft we all know is just kind of the garbage draft. It just lets us kind of spit out the idea, and then the second draft is okay. Now this is starting to take shape, and then I'll either hire or post and get volunteer actors, whatever it is, and we're very transparent. Hey, we're doing a read through on a script that I've got to deliver next week, or a script that I'm working on. We'd love to have you come, and there'll be pizza, and we'll hang out for a couple of hours. We'll read the script and then talk for an hour on notes. As I love the conversation afterwards, right? Reading the script together with the actors, and usually I like to read the mise en scène because I know the tone and the voice of the script. Or if I'm going to have somebody else read that, I make sure that they've read the script prior, so they know even kind of what the tone and feel is. because that can just derail a project if somebody's not, if that, you know, space between dialogue is messed up, that'll
Yeah.
just kill the whole read through, the vibe of the read through. But then, and I also tell the actors, say, look, we're not acting. This is not an audition. Like, don't overread. Please, let's just enjoy. Just let it wash over us, right? And then we do it. It takes an hour and a half to read the 90-page script, 100-page script, and then we take an hour to talk about it. And again, the same principles apply as far as receiving notes, where I'm not trying to correct or give excuses or say, oh, well, this is why that one, they say, oh, I don't think that this character is doing a lot. Okay, well, here's why. Because in the next scene you did it. No, 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 that's not the time for that.
Yeah.
Just sit and take notes. And I even take notes while they're doing the read through and say, why did they read the line that way? What have I written that cued them to read the line as as a confused question when it should be a direct statement? What have I written before that? Or, and so it's very, very valuable to do, and a great way to get even unsaid notes on a script.
Yeah, I've loved the Zion's Film Fest has started doing table reads as part of their festival, which has been really cool the last few years to sit in on those. Like I've had a lot of other producers reach out to me and say, will you come to our table read? And it's like, yeah, I'll sit there for an hour and a half or 2 hours and just take it in and give you 2 minutes of my thoughts afterwards. That's way easier. Since I'm already there, I've already dedicated the time to be at the festival. It's easier than setting aside the time at night in bed to read the screenplays when my wife's like, do you want to watch the show? It's like, oh, I'm reading a screenplay. But I've loved it because you can get audience reactions too. You can see if they laugh or see if they gasp if there's something that happened or see if they react. That's really important data when you're that early on in the process. And then it's been so fun to go up to the filmmaker friend afterwards and say, wow, that really, really worked. Or like, hey, that's pretty good for where you're at. Like, I'd love to have a conversation afterwards or whatever it might turn into. It's a cool thing they've set up. So if you haven't listened to the episode we did with Marshall and Michelle Moore about PR and film festivals, they're the ones who are running that. And it's pretty cool to be a part of it.
Yeah, we've got a board meeting tonight for the Zion's Indie Film Fest coming up in February. So
There you go.
yeah, it should be good. That's a good plug for them.
We had
Sure.
one other aspect of notes, but I think we save it for another time. This idea of notes during pre-production or when you're on set, like that seems like another conversation we can have another time when we're in that part of the process. But I feel really good about the convo we've had today so far.
Yeah, I agree. Great content. Hopefully this is helpful and beneficial. Again, it comes from a place of this is my experience as a filmmaker. Again, I've done 8 features and a number of different, hundreds of different projects. Notes have been a constant part of those, either client or producer notes or whatever it is. And so it's an important aspect of filmmaking.
Yeah, 100%. Does this mean we get to talk about the movie we saw yesterday now?
Oh, what a great experience. So thank you. Yes, we went to the theater yesterday and watched a movie that doesn't need any notes. Interstellar. It's the 10-year anniversary re-release on IMAX, and it was just a thrill to watch. It's one of my favorite movies. I watch it probably once a year, but to see it again in theaters in IMAX with my son and my wife, it was just such a joy. It was fun to see you there too.
Oh man, I watched that movie when it came out and I remember going, that's a big, awesome movie. And I love Christopher Nolan. Like he's so good, right? That was kind of the takeaway because I had young kids at the time. They were like 3, 1, and newborn when it
Yeah,
came out.
yeah.
And so I probably was just underslept and, tired when I watched it. And I haven't watched it like at home. I haven't seen it since theaters 10 years ago.
Oh
So
wow.
seeing it this time, the craft and the level of filmmaking prowess that every single person brought to the table was astounding.
Yeah.
Like the actors' performances and the direction and the cinematography and production design and everything was just bonkers. But man, I was crying, not just tearing up, like crying multiple times because I have a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 10-year-old, and like the idea of that, like I was in the place of Cooper, of Matthew McConaughey's character, and I could
Yeah.
so much more resonate with the emotions he must have experienced. And my gosh, I don't really think I appreciated the performance that McConaughey gave, but it is Oscar worthy. It is so good. And I can't imagine being, suspended from a rope in a stage across a green screen, and then having to process in real time what he was going through at the end of that movie. Like, just the level of talent
Yeah.
and craft again that he had just blew me away. It was so, so good.
Well, we weren't the only ones to see it. It did $4.6 million on its re-release. It came in as the number 6 film over the weekend, and
Yeah,
per
that's
screen
incredible.
average of $12,000 $27,000 per screen, according to Box Office Mojo.
That's amazing.
Uh, Good for them.
Gosh, that's huge. It's
Uh,
massive. Like,
I also screened The Piano Lesson, which I
ooh,
got on a Producers Guild screener, and what a well-made film. First-time film director, Washington, Denzel's son.
yeah, John
Uh,
David.
John David is in it, and then his brother directed it.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's a total family project. His
Did
sister is in
not
it,
know
and
that.
at the end of the film, they dedicate it to their mama, they
Wow,
said. And
that's crazy.
again, very very watchable movie. I watched it with Sherry and really enjoyed. The lighting and cinematography were standouts. It was awesome.
Wow. Wow, wow. That's awesome. I need to join the PGA so I can get screeners every Christmas.
Yeah, it is. It is like Christmas comes early. We just got the Moana 2 screener, which
Oh,
is
nice.
the number one movie in theaters right now. So
Yeah,
we're
that's been our theater going this last little while. Like, I saw Juror number 2, but everything else I've seen has been big releases. I saw Moana 2 with the family, Wicked with April, Gladiator 2 with Alan. We saw Red One as a family. Saw Interstellar with you. Like, I haven't seen any of these other indie releases. I mean, I would put Y2K as an indie release, but like, it's 2,100 screens by A24. It doesn't feel like an indie release anymore on that many screens. So yeah, I feel like I need to go and see Bonhoeffer. I haven't seen that, and there's a couple others. Anora that I wanted to see. Heretic, Conclave, A Real Pain. Like, there's a bunch, and I think they're all out of theaters now. I waited too long to see a bunch of these great indies. So yeah,
well.
no screeners for me. I'll wait till
You want
streaming.
to you want to come up? We can do a screener night and
Hey, there
watch
we
some of
go.
those movies because everything you've mentioned so far is sitting in my app, the
Oh,
producer's
that's
guild
awesome.
app.
Okay, done
Awesome,
deal.
Darren. What a great episode! Thank you very much. No notes on this one.
No
Great.
notes. Thanks, man.
But please, and thank you to everyone for listening and sharing the podcast. We're seeing continual growth each episode, and we love that people are sharing and commenting and sending in questions or thoughts. Keep it up.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey, be notified, and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast and put in your name and an email address. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and be sure to share this. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.